I think there's this untapped market that we can really kind of dig into, especially when we start incorporating the cleaning side of things with the restoration. We could be doing some things on the cleaning side of things that are preventing the mold issues and the allergy issues down the road. And when we really start to uncover the actual business model of this, you have the nice cash flow coming in from the carpet cleaning side of things, as you're ramping up the restoration side of the business too, which is definitely new to the industry. I don't know anybody else that's really doing it this way. And I think there's a lot of merit to it and a lot of good reasons for it.
Welcome to the Franchise Founders Podcast. We are on a mission to help aspiring entrepreneurs just like you take action through franchise ownership,
allowing you to obtain more financial freedom, time with family, and ultimately a business that can run on its own without you.
Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Founders Podcast, your weekly, sometimes bi-weekly franchise podcast on all things related to owning your own franchise business, running your own franchise company, and everything in between. I checked, and I think we've used the word franchise on this podcast over a couple thousand times. Our goal is to say the word franchise 1 million times at one point. Wanted to thank our special guest who's joining me today in the studio, live from Wisconsin, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder Zach Nolte of Franchise Playbook, and COO and co-founder of VODA Cleaning and Restoration, a brand by Franchise Playbook. And really excited to get into this episode. We talk about all things related to building and scaling a franchisor, what really a franchisor should be thinking about for their franchisees to support them at the highest level. And we get into all kinds of business lessons that Zach and I have learned through the years and through some scraped knees and bloody noses. So without further ado, I want to introduce Zach. Hey, Zach, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me as well. It's exciting because this is not our first time doing a podcast. We actually did an episode a while back when you were at Kitchen Solvers.
Yeah, that was before we knew that any of this was actually kind of unravel itself. But it was back in late August, early September.
It was it was late August, like a month before our conversations about Playbook. So that's kind of an interesting timing.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how things kind of unravel themselves a little bit and through conversations where we all end up very quickly.
Yeah, really. Well, for the listeners that don't know, so Zach's the COO of Franchise Playbook, and I'm CEO of our company, Franchise Playbook, and Zach and I partnered up literally in September or late September after attending a conference in our space called Springboard. It's a franchise conference for franchise professionals. We had known each other for years and always had good dialogue, but we were in different industries or different verticals. And so we started having conversations and partnered up right after that. So that podcast that we had done, if you listen to it, I'll put it into the notes and a link, was about a month prior to ending up deciding to work together.
Yeah, and I think our relationship up until that point was you were trying to sell Kitchen Solvers leads, and I would just keep avoiding having that conversation with you. So you're constantly chasing at that point. But I think actually where our relationship really started was at the Unconference back in, I think, 2020, right before COVID hit.
I think, well, if you remember, we sat in a room watching a panel, and we were sitting next to each other. And I think I remember us both basically saying, like, man, like that's what we'd like to build one day, respectively, with our own type of business. The speakers that were speaking were very, got us very excited about a future endeavor. So it's kind of funny how it all comes together.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's get started. I mean, to start, Zach, just can you give our listeners like the, synopsis of how you got to where you are today in your career and in franchising?
Yeah, for sure. What all started back in 2013. I was currently working at a manufacturing company. And that's kind of where like my dad was in manufacturing. Everybody I knew that was, and they were running operations. And I really knew that I loved like managing people and getting in front of people and motivating them and trying to see how the best way to kind of like pull information and get things from the general worker. And so that always was like a passion of mine. But then when I got into the manufacturing world, I was in the inventory, finished goods, learned a lot about lean manufacturing, how to run things like super efficiently. But it was just like the inventory side of things and cycle counts, and it just was not for me. So at that point, I started looking for other jobs, and the general manager of Kitchen Solvers at the time, who I knew through some small town neighborhood types of relationships, he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, come take a look at Kitchen Solvers." And I'm like, I don't know nothing about cabinetry. I know nothing about franchising. He's like, "No, don't worry about it. You'll do fine." And so I ended up kind of jumping into the company and in 2014. And at that point, the general manager, his name was Jerry Henley. He showed me everything about cabinetry that I needed to know. And it also started teaching me franchising. And from my very core values of that first kind of year and a half, it was how do I best support franchisees to make sure they know they get exactly what they wanted to coming into it. And then also how do we scale those businesses to make them profitable for that end goal. And so very early on, those kind of core values were kind of instilled into who I wanted to be within franchising. And then shortly after that, about a year and a half later, the general manager had left, which left me in a kind of an awkward position as kind of like the second man on the totem pole. And at the time, I wasn't ready to take on the president role. And so I started kind of interviewing for my own boss, which was an interesting endeavor. But hired a president who was there for about a year. And after he left, through the kind of the push from the franchisees, they all said, "Hey, why don't you step up and why don't you take the role?" And so at that point, I felt a lot more ready to be the president of Kitchen Solvers, and had a lot of cool things in the works with another company as well that we started out while I was with Kitchen Solvers. And then the rest is kind of history. We kind of were a re-emerging brand. It's a 40-year-old brand that needed some new life and some new energy brought to it. And so myself and the team that we kind of brought in at that time kind of brought that back to life. And Kitchen Solvers, which I'm very proud of, is definitely thriving, and they're continue to grow.
That's excellent. So background in lean manufacturing, I know you have a certificate. You're Six Sigma, right? Certified?
I was going through the process of that. I never actually got certified in it, but I spent a lot of time in the continuous improvement, went through all the classes and all that type of stuff. I just don't have the certifications.
Do you think well, close enough.
Close enough.
Yeah. That's like anything, right? Like when I was finishing my CFE, it was like, all right, at this point I got it, right? Or
you can teach the classes at this point.
Yeah. But it's like, sometimes that doesn't matter. But what do you think that my question was more around, do you think that early career in that manufacturing space and understanding, supply chain and understanding that overall operational side translated into your ability to succeed as a franchisor? Like, or do you think it was not really relatable?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And so when I was still in college, I worked for this manufacturing company. It's called Matthews Inc. They're one of the world's largest bow manufacturers, so archery products. And they're very, very into just efficiency, lean manufacturing, Six Sigma. And so I interned as a continuous improvement intern. And what that position and then my following position there when I got hired full time out of college, I learned like everything from raw materials inventory to how do those raw materials go into production, and then watching those raw materials then turn into finished products, and watching that entire process and understanding how the buyers work to get the raw materials, how the end person is then selling that the finished product to the consumer. That well-rounded kind of view of all the different positions and how each of those positions tie into each other, and that the one little tiny mistake that is made early on in the process and the ripple effect that has throughout the entire manufacturing process, like you fully kind of start appreciating the entire process. But it also allowed me to kind of start thinking about, like, when it relates to franchising, from the moment that we create the FDD, what is that ripple effect that it's going to then kind of happen to the franchisees, and how do the franchisees become successful? And then what is that relationship like with the franchisor? And so being able to kind of like foresee like all those different possibilities definitely played into kind of my early on career. And I've been able to use those same thought processes ever since.
That makes sense. You're understanding how one effect will move toward another, and down the supply chain down to the franchisee, how they're going to take that and make a decision. So you get into Kitchen Solvers and you start off really on the ground level. And then what you're saying is, through somewhat of like franchisee, you were nominated to be president, like a franchisee desire for you to step up into that role at that time.
Yeah, what it really comes down to is like the relationship with the franchisor and the franchisees really comes down to trust. I spent so much time with our franchisees understanding how the business runs, and then also understanding the cabinet world, so I could speak the same lingo as some of these guys that have been in the business for 20 or 30 years. And so, I mean, I got beat up. I really did. I got beat up by the franchisees and really trying to understand, what they want, and how do I then come into this business with zero experience, and how do I make myself kind of like this expert level experience. And so it took some time, and it took a lot of humbling experiences to really kind of start understanding that. And I could probably draw that back to about 5 franchises that really held me accountable for not only just the cabinet industry, but also as a franchisor. And so through those experiences, it really kind of started shaping kind of what my core values are at a franchisor level, but also having that kind of, I guess the cheerleading behind you from the franchisees to kind of step into that new role as a president. Definitely, I felt very supported. And that they all had my backs, and kind of allowing me to kind of mess up a little bit, test out some new ideas. And then as long as they knew that there was going to be strategic growth after that, they were all 100% on board with it.
Now, there were areas that you came in as president and you really transformed. And I don't know how much you want to get into the details, but I know around, business performance review type metrics and AUV metrics. And like, my first question is, when you got into that president role, how did you first identify what challenges were there and needed to be solved? And then how did you prioritize them? Like, what was that process like?
I'll get into the other two, but the main core one was that, and a huge shout out to this vendor partner in Franchise Business Review, FBR. Kitchen Solvers was doing FBR about a year before I got into it, and the scores at that time were bad. I mean, they were not great, and it had to do with some of the ownership changes that were happening. New people kind of coming into the business, kind of the changing of the culture and the guard, taking the model from like kind of a single owner operator model, where one person was coming in and doing everything from installation to sales to marketing, and then changing that model into something that they could kind of grow and scale from a bigger business side of things. And it was taking a look at these scores to realize that there's a massive issue with kind of the culture that was happening within Kitchen Solvers. And that was the first thing that we had to really kind of identify and start changing kind of the way that we approached how we interacted with our franchises. And so we started off, I can't remember exactly, but it was like the score was probably in the upper 50s, and the benchmark for FBR at that point, just the bare bones benchmark was like a 72. And so through those years of kind of taking that feedback from the franchises, and in communicating back on what the changes are, because that was a huge part of it, was this the lack of communication. We were able to then take that score of like the upper 50s into like a 62, 67. And then finally, I think the year that I became president, we jumped from like a 67 up to like a 75 or 78. And then when I left, we were scoring in the lower to mid 80s by the time we left. And so understanding that and be able to listen to the feedback from the franchise that what they were giving, making changes, and at our yearly conferences and at our yearly events that we had with them, we said, here's where we scored the lowest, and here's what we're going to do to change it. We had strategically put that FBR survey kind of in like the August, September mark. And so when we were able to then get the feedback, and we had 3 months to kind of vet out how we were going to change our model, how we're going to enhance our score, listen to the feedback from the franchises. And then at our next conference, which was usually in January, February, we were then able to say, here are the results, here are the things that we're going to do differently. What are your thoughts? And then be able to get the direct feedback from the franchisees.
So you're able to utilize the information in the FBR data, like the way they answered the questions. That's what gave you the areas that needed improvement. And I'm sure you were able to then prioritize which ones needed to be addressed first. And then you would additionally go and speak with franchisees and get their feedback and essentially buy-in before going forward and then solving those problems. You would get their feedback on your path to how you were going to solve those problems.
Exactly. Yeah. And the feedback piece of it too is like, there's a lot of people that are like, well, why don't you just talk to your franchises more? It's like, you can, but they're not always going to tell you exactly what they feel until they get like an anonymous survey that takes them 15 minutes to kind of complete. And it gets into questions that they may not have really thought to bring up to you. And so like, are you happy with your financial performance? Well, not really, but is that something that you can fix? Like, I'll put in the survey, and there's definitely something that we can do to fix those things. And so let's really dig deep into those. And so the FBR survey was like one small portion of the giant feedback loop that we were getting from the franchises, but it was definitely the most important because you got data. Like there was like something tangible there to hold on to, and you were able to see the results across all your franchises that took the survey.
Right. So now at this time, as you're improving and you're running Kitchen Solvers as president, you also start another kitchen franchisor in the kitchen space. Well, one, how did you have the time to? Like, how did you build that?
Yeah, it was like we had tried for probably, I would say like 2 years to push this product line and what was called storage solutions underneath the Kitchen Solvers model. And it was basically the selling of additional storage products, kind of the upsell types of products into the kitchen. And like a lot of people, some people did really well with it. But it was to really kind of push that mark, I guess, to its fullest extent, it had to be its own standalone product. The sales process was different. It was a little bit more higher pressure sales. It took a lot more sales training to get into that type of product, very high margins on it. And it wasn't necessarily like an absolute need within the kitchen. It was something that like you wanted to have. And so understanding that, and then also understanding like what Shelf Genie was doing. Shelf Genie was a massive, and they still are. I think I just saw them ranked in the top 20 or 25 in the top franchises. Great company. But there was no one in that space to kind of compete. So with it being kind of a smaller market, and then also knowing that a lot of consumers loved dealing with this type of product, we decided to branch it off into a completely separate franchisor. So really just started everything from scratch. We took a lot of the core processes of Kitchen Solvers and implemented them into Kitchen Wise, was the name of the company. And so I got to go through that whole, starting a company, kind of building out the formation of it, going through a complete new rebranding project. I worked with an awesome guy down in Vegas that he helped this whole vision come to life. And I have a huge respect for that type of creative. So it was fun to kind of go through But then building out the pricing programs, the sales processes, and really putting together a nice package for future franchises. And so, like you alluded to, like Kitchen Solvers at the same time was taking off. And then I had Kitchen Wise that was also, we were running a remote office up in Minneapolis, and that was when our kind of our first location was up there. So I had a general manager up there running that company. And then we brought on a couple franchises, and it did become almost too much work at some point. And so when I had the opportunity, someone came up to me and was generally interested in it. The price was right, and we ended up selling the company about 3 years later. And it's definitely fun to have gone through that experience, but it's also like there's a little part of me that's like that's my baby still.
Yeah, and it continues to thrive and it continues to grow, as does your previous company. But it's interesting because, I was always impressed when we started talking about that, was that you saw that the priority had to go into Kitchen Solvers as it was taking that uplift, and that kitchen, like you gave Kitchen Wise a home where it could thrive in a platform, and when you exited that business. But it's interesting because like when you think back, like both experiences as running a large franchisor in home services and then starting, like you said, through a branding agency and creating the pricing models, both experiences bring us to here, right? Where that's exactly what we do, right? Like it was all about with Playbooks starting out, hey, we're going to have to do the nitty gritty stuff nobody wants to do today, but we also are going to be running a large company managing lots of people. And you've done both. You've been in both seats.
Yeah. I get the question every so often. It's like, hey, do you regret selling it or regret exiting from it? There's nothing about it that I regret for sure. But what I really kind of allude my late 20s and early 30s to was that I wanted to gain as much experience as possible so that I can then share that experience with everybody else I'm working with. And so being able to go through that exit, I now had something to say and talk about to our franchisees and saying, I've been through this. Like I know what the steps are in order to get my business sold. So when a franchisee comes in for the first day of training, and when we focusing on their financial break even, but we also ask the questions like, what do you want to do with this in the next 10, 15 years? Are you building this up for your kids to take over? Or are you selling the company? And if you are selling the company, I now have that experience where I can share that with you and provide some guidance through that. And I think now in our current endeavor with Playbook and those future franchises, I still have that experience to be able to kind of go through and really talk them through that entire process, which I think is invaluable, especially this early on in my career.
Yeah, I equate exiting a business as an entrepreneur to like, getting your MBA or it's like your notch. It's like it's a notch on the belt that shows a true ability to build a company. Like you built something that was able to remove you fully. I mean, 2 times now, right? Kitchen Solvers again continues to thrive, right? Without, you at the helm, because you set up the systems properly, right? For the franchisees and for the company. Kitchen Wise, same thing. And I think it's also interesting because you had that experience of your baby going to someone else. And I think knowing how to remove yourself from your business from an emotional place allows you to make such better logical decisions, which now you have that behind you as well. Same for me. It's like knowing that you can love your business and love the people, but being able to remove your emotions from it so that you can make decisions that are best for the company, not best for your ego.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I would change it just a little bit to say like those are very emotional things that you can go through, and there can be emotion tied to them, but you can't allow them to cloud your judgment. And so there's things that like leaving Kitchen Solvers is probably the hardest things that I've had to do in my career by far. Where I left a team that I had built and that I highly respect, and they're very talented individuals. And I left a franchisee base that all trusted who I was in the direction of the company, and that I built really good relationships with as well. But at the same time, like when there's opportunities to kind of take, you have to weigh the pros and cons, remove the emotion from those decisions, and then take steps forward into whatever that path looks like for you.
Sure, absolutely. So let's get into that. So we start Playbook, which was September, right? So like late September, early, we start talking, having conversations, painting the vision of what we wanted to do. Man, I remember being, I don't know what trip I was on, but I was traveling. I remember just constantly texting back and forth about, just think back, not that long ago, what industry are we going to go into? Right.
Yeah.
We were thinking about car detailing and roofing and siding, and like, that wasn't long ago.
No, right. It feels like a long time ago, but at the same time, like it was a very short time ago. Yeah, and I think once we kind of figured out that, like, all right, there's something here. I think we were all through October, end of October, and then into November. We were definitely kind of going back and forth a ton on the industry that we wanted to go. And I think by mid-October, we were like identified, this is the industry we want to do, and let's rock and roll in it. So that was a lot of text back and forth. I remember my wife being like, who are we on the phone with? I'm like, Dan. It's always Dan.
Same here. I get those, we have our late night, now it's Teams messages, but those messages fly throughout the week, the weekend, nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have to meet, our significant others will have to meet soon enough. But so like, it's interesting because, like, and then we had Steve and our team, doing lead generate. We were talking to businesses. We were on Biz Buy Sell. We looked at, dozens of industries and, a lot of businesses. What do you think for you, Zach? What really pulled the trigger for you, or, what really clicked about restoration and cleaning that made you feel so confident in that being our first industry and brand?
Yeah, I think just from the standpoint that I feel like it's a very large industry, and I don't think the actual data that there is on the industry is even close to being accurate. I think it's probably almost double, if not triple, the numbers that are reported. But also too, that there's a way for us to incorporate a lot of technology into the industry as well that I think is coming down the pipeline. So that, and then also being recession resistant and pandemic resistant, there's always going to be a need for homes. The average life of the home is only going to get bigger, and it seems like there's a lot of the climate differences in the last couple of years here that are opening up things. But also I think there's another side of restoration when you can kind of get into like the healthy home living, where people are really starting to pay attention more to that. And so eliminating dust and mold and whatever else are causing allergens and health sicknesses that you may not know are there. I think there's this untapped market that we can really kind of dig into, especially when we start incorporating the cleaning side of things with the restoration. We could be doing some things on the cleaning side of things that are preventing the mold issues and the allergy issues down the road. And when we really start to uncover the actual business model of this, you have the nice cash flow coming in from the carpet cleaning side of things as you're ramping up the restoration side of the business too, which is definitely new to the industry. I don't know anybody else that's really doing it this way. And I think there's a lot of merit to it and a lot of good reasons for it. And that has come through like a lot of the validation that we've gotten as we're vetting this business from people directly in the industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'd love to offline learn about when I think you perhaps said the triple number after even more data. I know you've been digging into restoration with some tremendous restoration leaders that they're tapped into now. But, because I heard the same thing. I was always gravitated, like someone once told me, or actually it's something I read in a book called Enterprise Value, which talks about when you're looking at starting a company, my last company that I started, it wasn't about starting some company that could be massive and you can have an exit to PE. That wasn't the thought. It was about how can I make a living? Like, honestly, like how could I have my own business, control my own destiny, have my own, freedom, and build a business that pays enough to live. And then as the business grew, the idea of building something much larger started to come in, because I think if you're someone listening to this and you're potentially going to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't start that way. It could start big, but you don't have to start with like, I want to have a massive empire and have 50 units of a brand. You could just start with, how do I replace my income and have my own business and not have to answer to, Bob the boss I don't like. And then you can get confident by doing that. And then you go to the next milestone, right? So like for me, the the goalpost has moved a bit in the sense that now it's chasing legacy and building a company that affects a lot more people. I want to help thousands of people become business owners and succeed. But that wasn't the goal years ago of starting my previous company. But in this one, when we looked at industries, I started reading Enterprise Value, and they said, is the industry in or out of favor with institutional investors? Meaning, are institutional investors like it or don't like it? And restoration it's a $210 billion industry. As Zach said, we think it may be. There's data that's saying that it's $300 billion based on the fact that people don't always report all the jobs. And I'm sure you can get into that, but there's even a belief that, like you said, maybe is even more than that. But overall, the industry at $210 billion is massive. If you think about the pizza industry, it's a $50 billion industry, and you see a pizza place at every single corner. That's a quarter of the size. And we don't realize it's so big because unlike a fire truck that's screaming down the road at the ambulance when there's a fire, you see that. You see pizza. You see, these consumer gyms, but you don't see water restoration. You don't realize it's happening in your neighbor next door, right? Yet there's 14,000 water damage incidents a day. And so for me, like seeing the size of the industry, the year-over-year growth, I think is about 6%, which is massive on 210 billion or 300 billion, whatever. And then you looked at Enterprise Value, talked about, is that industry in or out of favor with institutional investors? We saw roll-ups happening all over the restoration space outside of franchising. And so like for me, I fell in love with this idea that the other brands, there's great, tremendous, large restoration companies in the space now, but they're large, well-known, established brands. And there was an opportunity to come in on the ground level. And like Franchise Playbook, our mission is to empower entrepreneurs to think bigger. And with our first brand in the Holdco, we wanted a business that we could really provide business owners with an opportunity to have a scalable, I don't like the word semi-absentee, a scalable manage the manager kind of business. And so like, as we looked at restoration, it was pretty serendipitous that our founder that of the brand that we acquired, like I remember going in there, and this is not a claim to what our franchisees could do. I just want to be clear. But the founder of the business has been doing this for 13 years. He joked around with me. He said, Dan, I come in here about 7. I have a team meeting at 8. And by 9:30, I'm done with my work. And like, it runs. It's a very simple business model if you think about it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said too. And what allowed our founder to do that is that like, he does take that approach where he is people first. Like he's got an amazing culture that he's established that is definitely replicable, but you have to like really believe in your core values, and you have to really instill those into the employees that you hire. And if you're able to do so, he's got like this amazing group of people that all learned the industry from him, got into the business, and just slowly just kind of started building up the business to a point where he's able to take a step back. And he doesn't have to be in the field. He doesn't have to learn the day-to-day, but he's looking at these amazing spreadsheets that he's put together to understand the business model on a very deep level and to really start fine-tuning it so that it can be more profitable at the end. It's definitely a testament to him as a manager.
Oh, absolutely. And as a visionary leader, I mean, you think so we're going like in this saga or in this story. So we decided to build Franchise Playbook, an incubator of dynamic franchise brands where we own and operate these brands. Audacious goal, right? We set a goal of having 10 brands by 2030, not tomorrow. I always clarify to people. Why did we do that? We decided that we knew we wanted to build a platform. And even if the next brand didn't come for 5 years, we made the decision together that it's better to tell a potential franchisee, look, this is the plan from day one. We're going to build VODA cleaning and restoration. We're going to make it tremendously successful. We're laser focused on that. We're building the systems up front so that we can be able to work on the next brand in the future. Here's why it will benefit you. Here's how and why we're doing it. Instead of 3 years from now coming out and saying, hey, by the way, we're starting another brand, and sorry, too bad you didn't sign in onto it. It doesn't matter. No, instead we're getting buy-in up front. Because it's funny, people joke around me. They're like, wow, you're pretty confident to say 10 brands. Well, again, the goal is not 10 brands tomorrow, right? The goal is to tell people our true vision so that we're transparent. but like when we were looking at industries, then we had to go into the acquisition process, which neither of us have done.
Yeah, that was definitely a first experience for me. And there's always, I think plenty of people had warned us, it always takes longer than you think. And how many times we were like, all right, one more week. And it's definitely like, again, this invaluable experience you go through that watching and negotiating with the founder and then bringing in attorneys and then they bring their attorney into it. And like that whole, the game that happens there. It was an incredible experience for sure. And I learned probably more in that, I don't know, probably 30 to 40 days of negotiating than I have, and probably 5 or 6 years of running a business. But it was wild, but it was amazing. And we all left, I think that agreement, like pretty happy with the way that things turned out.
Yeah. I mean, if you remember, like the initial conversation was, look, a good agreement. Everyone's gonna be a little unhappy, right? Everyone's gonna get a little bit of something or not get something that they want. And that's a good deal. And you don't want to make a deal with someone that they're not happy. So I'm very happy the relationship we've built with our founder. But let me ask a question. Do you think, had you not gone through the exit of your previous business, do you think you would have been able to facilitate this acquisition in the way that we did so smoothly? I feel like it was very smooth for two people that have never done that before and a founder that's never done that before. But do you think you'd been able to without having the previous experience of being on the other end?
Yeah, you definitely learn a lot through those experiences. And I think, again, one of the biggest things we always had to remind ourselves of, but also remind our founder of, is to take that emotion out of agreements. Like, we were having separate conversations about how we were going to move forward and how we we're going to build the business. But when it came to talking about the legal, all that relationship stuff had to be kind of set aside. And it's not us attacking you. It's just attacking the words that are on the legal documents and trying to come up with a solution that is best for everybody. And so having done that already and like seeing the ups and downs of the emotional roller coaster it goes through, I don't know how many times I left the negotiation with KitchenWise being like, it's not happening. There's no way. There's no way we're going to meet in the middle on this one. And in the end of the day, it all works out. But if you sit there and you beat yourself up over all these little points, all the scenarios that you don't think of that the lawyers bring to the table, you can probably drive yourself pretty crazy. But I think the main point of all that is that we knew that we had a end goal, and we also, our founder had an end goal, and it was the same. So it's just like whatever path we got to, it was going to end up with us getting the deal done. And so we knew that was the path. And so it made we could have probably stretched it out for 6 months. Like it could have been a long, long process, but we were at a point where we wanted to make a deal. And the founder also wanted to make a deal, which allowed us to get to things a little bit quicker. So long answer, I think that experience from an emotional standpoint definitely helped out.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, like, for me, learning from my exit, like, there was things I could have done differently. And like, there were like understanding that nothing in a transaction, whether on the acquirer or acquiree, is personal. None of it. Not one thing is personal. And you should, of course, approach everything with care and be a gentleman about how you deal with things. Nothing in any interaction is personal. And so, like, for me, during the acquisition process, staying calm through the process. And really, I think what we also did, Zach, is we built a really deep relationship with Dragon, with the founder and his family and our families. And like, we really prioritized that, hey, look, when the negotiating of this agreement's happening, that's separate from when we're out to dinner and we're building a relationship. I also think what you said, which was we kept our eye on the prize and we continue to build we built the business while we were negotiating anyway, which I think showed a level of commitment to them that we're not going anywhere. We intend to make a deal happen. I know for the next time, and I also think, I don't know about you, but I think because we were willing to be flexible and listen with the intent of understanding their perspective, I almost think that we've made the deal that we can make again and again because we figured out what would, like, I personally, when we do this again with a business, I don't think there's a better deal you can get. Like, we did it in such a way that's so aligned between the founder of the business and ourselves.
Yeah. 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 We've joked a couple different times that all the legal fees that we put into this one, we can stretch those out across our next 10 brands. And so
cool.
we can definitely, it's being able to have that agreement. We know how to structure these agreements now. We're able to kind of then bring that structured agreement to kind of our first couple meetings with a new brand that we're looking at acquiring. We say, this is how we're going to do things. And then we can kind of negotiate and fine tune on the small things. But overall, like we already have the playbook created for how we're going to acquire businesses. And that playbook is not going to work for everybody else that might be trying to create what we're trying to create, but it's perfect for what we're trying to get. And that's someone, we're partnering with people that believe in the mission. They understand our goals, and they also understand that their goals, and we all can come out winning together.
Yeah, completely. So, all right, let's jump into, well, one of the things you said that I definitely want to hit on is the technology component, but let's just, this is a fun, like, we've kind of gone through this journey, right? So we make the acquisition in February, and the next project, well, I mean, of course it was done in tandem to the acquisition, but for all intents and purposes, anyone listening, we acquire the brand, we set out to hit a rebrand because we wanted to create a nationally recognizable brand, something that would stick in the minds and hearts of our consumer, right? And our goal at VODA is to create a new level of clean. We wanted to go after the homes that were high-end and affluent. And so through this agency who works with like companies like Target, we were intentional with how do we create a brand in the restoration and in the cleaning space that would stand out in their mind and hearts of the consumer and resonate with them, that we were going to be able to not only be there in the time of an emergency like water damage issue, but also provide a new level of clean where the experience was so professional. Walk me through that, man. Cause like, I remember the initial conversation around, I mean, every entrepreneur wants to go through a branding project like that. I mean, we did it to the fullest. And you had done it with Kitchen Wise. I had done it with Playbook. Let's just talk through that journey real quick.
Yeah. Given our short period of time that we had to like rebrand, come up with a new name for the company, and then do this in a short amount of time because we wanted to start selling as quickly as possible. We almost put like a goal and a timeline that was impossible to hit. And so we had to take that into consideration when vetting out the branding company. And we vetted probably 10 or 15 different companies. A lot of them great. A lot of them were awesome companies that we thought could provide us exactly what we needed. But there was always that element of time, like how quickly can we get all this done? And our CMO, Christian Bencourt, like he's done this. He knows branding companies, and one thing that Dan, that you and I have always talked about is that we now get the chance at this level to be able to build things the way that we've always wanted them to be built, with no franchisees or no board of directors or anything like that is trying to push us into a certain direction. Like we get to start at like ground zero, and ground zero is like level 1,000. And for us, we were able to start and build those companies out right away. And so he had a couple in mind of branding agencies that he wanted to work with. And we were able to then part with this. And so with his expertise on that side of things, we were able to set the expectations. And I always have like this like really cool, like, I guess passion or just outlook on the whole marketing and branding side of things, because my brain does not work like that at all. But there are people out there that they can take your words of things that you're saying, of what you want the brand to look like. They're able to spin it in a way that all of a sudden comes out in this perfect picture of what you thought in your head. And now you get to see a visual of what it is. And to be able to do that, it's amazing to me. And so they were able to kind of take this company. They heard from the founders. They heard from the leadership team at Playbook. And we were able to then come up with this amazing brand that definitely sticks out from the rest of the restoration brands, I think, in a way that brings like a level of sophistication and a level of cleanliness to the brand, to the point where I think people will see VODA and they just naturally kind of fall in love with the imaging that we create. But the company did an amazing job hitting our timelines, hitting these unrealistic goals. And I don't expect that to happen again, but it's something that did happen, and we're very thankful for it.
Yeah. Everything aligned. I know we're coming up on time, but like what I'll just say is, like, when it came to the brand, we wanted, like, we have a brand. It's not, when I say nationally recognizable, of course it's not known across the nation yet. Yeah. That's the plan that it will, but it's designed utilizing demographic and psychographic data that this brand would resonate really well when it came to restoring and it came to cleaning. And again, we know that you, as much as I do, that having the cleaning and the restoration together allows us to get into the home, build the trust, get other restoration work. It allows our franchisees to have cleaning business with very cash flow, the cash flow quicker while they wait on the restoration work, because anyone in restoration has to build relationships with property managers and plumbers and insurance, and they have to wait for the job to pay them, right, when they get paid by insurance. And so we're solving that maybe potential cash flow issue by having the cleaning, which is very simple and honestly, I think it's a joyful business, right? You come in, you clean a carpet or floor. I mean, this company, we made the acquisition especially because there was over 1,000 5-star reviews. I remember one night being up till like 4 a.m, just reading them, every single review, and being like, this is an unbelievable company. They've bottled the way of doing the customer experience in a way that's so uncanny. I think, just as we wrap up on time, like, the things that I thought were really cool about us building this brand were, one, as you mentioned, we've had this decision tree or way of making decisions with Christian. Hey, Christian, you've been a CMO for a while. You've been a marketer for a long time. You haven't just you didn't just get a branding task and think about it for a week. He's been thinking about that for a really long time, years probably, right? So we were able to deploy the perfect branding agency after someone did years of research that are part of our intellectual, and human capital in the firm. And then for you, Zach, like, I think the coolest thing we did here is said, hey, everything that could be improved, we were able to do in our system from day one, from the proprietary technology stack that we've built to scoreboard with our data analytics, to the lead generation that we're doing, to the way we're finding trucks, right? I mean, to the way that we're helping. Obviously, we can't help in the sense of hire people, but the way that we've designed some outsourced partners to find employees. I mean, every question and potential issue that a franchisee can have, we've set those systems up. I mean, you joked around yesterday that we have more, in my opinion, we have more support than 90% of franchisors, and we don't even have a franchisee yet. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing.
Now we just got to add fuel to add the people in. Yeah.
Yes. Plug and play. Just got to add them to the system and keep supporting them the way that we know how to support franchises. And I think we're building something very, very special from the support side of things.
I agree. Well, thanks for joining the show. Obviously, we got a busy schedule, so appreciate you carving out an hour of your day to talk a little bit about our journey so far.
Not a problem. Love doing it.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Zach Nolte, COO and co-founder of Franchise Playbook and co-founder of VODA Cleaning and Restoration, COO of the company. We've recently launched. We're working with lots of franchise candidates to be franchisee number one. If you want to be part of that starting lineup of franchisees that are getting that VIP treatment, the white glove of us being involved from the start. Remember, we may be new to restoration, although our founder and executive team, some of them on the team are not. We are not new to franchising. We are a franchisor background. I joke that there's franchise systems with 50 or even 100 units that have less experience than we do between the team of people, right? And so if you want to be in on the ground level with the franchise system and get tremendous support, we're here to chat.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Founders Podcast.
If you want our help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business to anything in between, shoot us an email at franchisefounders@gmail.com.